All right, so I brought one of my blowout kits, and I want to ask Joe to take a look at it and see if there's anything else that I need, and just get his opinion on what I've got. So I'm just going to dump it out right here on the stretcher, and I'll be honest with you, I've already opened it because I used it not too long ago at the gun range. Guy had a nice little bleed, so I took care of it.
So as I look at everything that's in here, there's a ton of different types of blowout kits. You know, you build a better mousetrap, so it seems as though everybody wants to come out with a different blowout kit with different components. But for the most part, I think every blowout kit should have roughly the same components. Probably the most important thing in the tourniquet, or in the blowout kit's a tourniquet.
Okay.
This one's a TK4. It's a big elastic band with 2 hooks on either end, which I've seen it work. And for the most part, all these tourniquets will work. It's just, do any work better than the other? And probably the best question you can ask yourself is, does it work good for me?
Do I know how to put it on, and can I cinch it up really tight?
Yep. And the best thing is, can I put it on myself? Even more importantly, can I put it on with my non-dominant hand? So let's say, for example, I'm right-handed. I get into a two-way live fire, and I take a shot to the right arm. Well, now I have to take, and am I able to put this tourniquet on with my non-dominant hand to my dominant arm? And that's pretty important. And so can you do that with the tourniquet that you have, whether it's a TK4 or it's a CAT, or my personal favorite, the Soft T-Wide? Just really depends. But tourniquet, extremely important. Probably another big one on tourniquets is have it out and available. You never want to have the tourniquet in the wrapper. I'd want to open it up. Me personally, when I'm wearing kit, I'll have 2 tourniquets that I'm running on my kit. One back here where my blowout kit is, and then another one somewhere where I can reach it with either one of my hands. And that's pretty important. So having it not in the bag, but out exposed and ready to go and gassed up.
So I need to take that out of the bag then?
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm going to go ahead and do that.
I notice you have gloves in here. Probably in the civilian environment, these are important, because there's a lot of disease out there. There's AIDS, there's hepatitis in an EMS world. You want to be very careful of that. I never wore gloves, especially on the battlefield. All these guys I knew, I lived with, I ate with, I partied with. And luckily for me, you can't get AIDS twice. So I didn't bother wearing gloves. So you do have gauze here. Incredibly important. Sterility, or something being clean or sterile, isn't necessarily important, especially in the street or in a gunfight. You have to remember that the bullet, when it strikes you, creates a vacuum, and it's going to pull some of the atmosphere and clothing and whatever's on that clothing into the wound. So chances are the wound's already dirty. So if this is in plastic or in a shrink-wrapped bag, great. If it's not, it could still work.
So I cut some of that off to wrap up this guy's hand. He had a moment of being stupid on the range with his gun, and he paid for it. And I just luckily happened to be standing there and was able to grab my kit. This is actually the one that I had in my range bag, wrap it around him, and take care of business right then and there. But I didn't want to throw that away, so I just shoved it back into my bag. But yeah, you're right. It did come in a package, but that package is on the ground somewhere still.
And most definitely, if you don't use it all like you did, put it right back in your package, because you could always use it later.
And I could use this to wrap around my finger and then shove into the hole that the bullet made and keep pushing and pushing and pushing all this, try to get as much gauze in there to pack the wound. And like you said, most people don't realize that wound is already dirty. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to make it sterile by putting sterile gauze in there. It's already dirty. So they'll take care of that in the emergency room, in the operating room.
They will. And they're going to put them on mass quantities of antibiotics anyway. So if there is infection in there, they'll kill it with all the antibiotics they give them. Something else, too, this gauze, this is just straight cotton woven gauze. And it works. It will. Like you said, you can pack a wound with it, and it works great. And you'll stop the bleed, hopefully, if you do it right. There's another product out there. It's called Combat Gauze, and it's the same thing. It's cotton woven gauze for the most part, but it's impregnated with something. And what it's impregnated with is a material called kaolin. Kaolin is a clay mineral. And basically what it does is when you pack this into the wound, that clay mineral activates and it absorbs the liquid portion of the blood into the bandage. But what it leaves behind is the stuff in your blood that helps you make clots.
Clots, right.
Right. So not only are you packing gauze into the wound, but you're also adding something in there that's in the bandage to help cause the wound to clot off maybe a little faster. But if you don't have that, because it is a bit more expensive than just regular old gauze, this will still work. You have tape. This is duct tape.
Correct.
There's a company that sells it, and it's called Combat Medic Tape. I believe it's 98 cents a roll. Me personally, what I do, in my blowout kit, I have a Sharpie permanent marker, and then I just take duct tape I buy from Lowe's, and I just wrap that around the handle of the Sharpie marker. So, I have duct tape that I might need to tape plastic over a hole in the chest, tape plastic down with that tape. But then I also have a marker. And what do I use that marker for? Well, I use that marker to write on my patient. So when the paramedics do show up, or medical professionals, I will write on my patient with that marker on his chest, broken right arm, gunshot wound to right leg. So this way they know what's going on, and there's a record of his treatments and his injuries that will carry on with him. So when the doctor sees that, he'll have that marker, and you have the tape.
That's a good idea. That's a real good idea.
You have, it looks like a needle here, and an alcohol pad. Now this needle, I'm making the assumption that you use this for collapsed lung.
Yeah, chest decompression.
Chest decompression. Correct. So this is another good thing to have in there. These needles need to be 3 1/4 inches long, and they need to be hopefully a 14 gauge. 14 gauge just really means how big a round it is. And then the length, the 3 1/4 inches, is because you're going to be driving this thing into someone's chest wall. And this is for when the lung collapses because you've been shot or something's penetrated your chest wall. You put that piece of plastic over it to seal it. Well, now pressure will get trapped in there as they continue to breathe. And this is used to poke a hole into that space where the lung used to be, into his chest, and try to let some of that pressure out, or we call it decompressing the chest.
Well, going back to the liability thing that we've discussed, and the knowledge has permeated, the shooting community really well. But just to reiterate, this kit is to work on my family and me.
Of course.
And so using a needle to decompress someone's chest that's my daughter's chest, that's my wife's chest, my son's chest. And for somebody like you to use it on me, drop my chest. This is not something I go around and start poking holes into people I don't know. So
right.
I wanted to clarify that with
Thank
you.
You for clarifying that.
How I intend to use that. And then I use the clothespins, talking about the tongue, right? I can take a clothespin, run through the tongue, and clothespin it to their lip, or outside. I know it sounds really disgusting, but if I don't have that J-tube or the oral pharyngeal that you're talking about, and I'm in a crazy environment, then I have some options. I mean, it's not ideal, but people get their tongue pierced. Whatever. It's no opinion, not judging. Just saying people get their tongue pierced. Doesn't kill them at all. They walk around with little balls in their mouth all the time. So pinning a needle through the tongue, if that's a last ditch effort that I have, then I have the options available. And
you have to remember too that if you're going to do that person already night.
Oh, sure.
So they're already asleep.
Sure.
So chances are you running that safety pin through their tongue and their lip, they're not going to feel it. Also, that needle, if you were to ever see one of these needles up close, somebody might say, holy cow, that thing's huge. Well, you have to remember that a projectile of some sort has just ripped a hole into their chest wall. Well bigger than that, chances are.
Even a 22 is a lot bigger than that.
Right. So chances are they're probably in a lot more pain from the flesh that was just torn apart by that bullet, vice you sticking that needle in their chest. So it's all relative. You also, it appears that you have a bandage here as well. So the bandage is a H bandage. It's a bandage. All of these commercially made bandages are for the most part the same. And at its very basic components are this, somewhat like this, just folded up into a package. And then they take and sew, essentially, or glue an ACE wrap onto that. And that's what makes it a bandage. So this will work. It works great. This one has a little H device on it that helps you put some more torque. That's the word you want to use. Or,
right. So that I don't have to hold my hand down as much.
Yeah, it helps you get that pressure through interweaving it within that H. And it pushes pressure down onto the wound, which is helpful. Now, something to keep in mind is these bandages are a little more expensive than simply just buying this in an ace wrap. You know, these are 58 cents and an ace wrap is 72 cents. That's ballpark. These are anywhere from $6.40 all the way up to $9 and change. Not only that, but weight cubed. You know, how big of a blowout kit do I have? How much
room do I have to carry it?
How much room do I have to carry it? Well, this thing, if you look at it, takes up quite a bit of space. And it's not necessarily any heavier, but it does take up a lot of space where I can maybe carry 2 of these and 2 3-inch ace wraps instead of carrying this big thing that may cost a little bit more money. So
I need a cargo pocket to carry that in.
Right. And then on top of that, you have a nose hose, which is a nasopharyngeal airway, or sometimes we call them a nasal trumpet, and it has a lubrication packet. You had touched on it earlier, that J-tube that goes in someone's mouth, and that helps keep that airway open and tongue off the back of the throat. Well, for the most part, that can only be used on someone that's unconscious.
Correct.
Theoretically, you shouldn't be conscious.
You're going to hit the gag reflex.
Right, and you shouldn't be able to take one of those if you're conscious. You know, again, I don't judge, but
right.
This nasopharyngeal airway is meant to go in the nostril.
Nothing but good, clean family fun here.
Right, of course. This is meant to go in one of the nostrils, typically the right. For whatever reason, the Celestial Design Committee, whoever you prescribe to, made their right nostril straighter than the left, so it'll accept it easier. So typically you put some of the lubrication jelly on there and you slide it into the right nostril. By no means is it comfortable, but it keeps the airway open, and you could do it on someone who's conscious or unconscious. And these things they're relatively cheap. I don't know offhand how much they are, but they're very cheap. And then finally, you have a set of what we call Emt Shears, or they're called nickel cutters. I will tell you that yes, this will cut through a penny, but the problem is it only does it once or twice, and then after that, you're not getting through paper with it.
Well, these are really special to me because first of all, the blades are black, and then the handle is tan. And we all know in the shooting world that anything tan works a lot better, and therefore they charge more for it.
Of course.
So, I didn't know if there maybe be someone there taking pictures of me while I was doing my stuff, so I wanted to look cool. So that's why that's there.
And if you had some Velcro on it and maybe an Oakley symbol, it would be worth even more. You could sell billions. But these are great. They're typically used to cut through material. I remember when I was in an airborne unit, I had a guy that was unconscious. He'd knocked himself unconscious coming out of the plane. So as I'm on the ground and I'm rolling up my parachute, I happen to look up and I see this guy, and he's not out, and he's asleep, coming down to the ground with his parachute above him in his harness, and he hit the ground like a sack of potatoes. But now he's all wrapped up in the lines that lead from his harness up to the parachute and the parachute itself. And in order to get him out and treat him, I just pulled my Emt Shears out. Unfortunately, they weren't black, so they probably didn't work as well. But I just started cutting through all the parachute material to get him out and freed from that so I can begin working on him.
And you can't treat what you can't see.
That's right.
Being able to expose whatever is hurt, bleeding, or bad, using those, and then they attach this handy dandy little seatbelt cutter or whatever you want to use it for. So I just paid a whole bunch of money for a pocket knife would work too, but that looks cooler.
And something that this is good for, it does look cooler, so of course you got that going for you. The pocket knife, what you have to be careful with is, you want to cut into somebody's gear, get them away from it. Well, you're shaking like crazy because you're amped up and you've got this adrenaline flowing. Well, you take this Benchmade or Gerber, whatever you're cutting them with.
Oh, it's going to be a high dollar knife, by the way.
Of course,
sure.
Right. The Infidel.
Sure.
You might as well go full bore on it.
Right.
So you take this knife and you go to stick it in there and cut away his gear. But because you're so amped up, you stab him with it, and create a new injury. This thing's good because it has that rounded edge. And so really, if you look at the Emt Shears, they have to have this little safety that's on there. So if you do have to cut into somebody's gear, hopefully you have that little safety rounded edge so you don't accidentally cut them and create another wound on top of it. But it, for the most part, looks like you've got a fairly decent blowout kit there. And then the bag itself, I noticed that you had wasn't terribly high speed. Well,
it's clear, and it's plastic, so it works out really well. No, I mean, we buy these kits and then we put some type of Cordura bag, that's multicam or whatever, so that the Hodgies don't see us when we're using it. That's all ancillary. I've got some stuff for a kid. I've got stuff, a way to carry it in my truck. in my house, and that doesn't all look military wise, but the key components, I think, is really what's important, and how you store them, that's up to you. And that's my personal opinion on it. I mean, you can look really cool, and there's certainly some very high dollar bags or ways of carrying it that you can purchase. But that bag is not going to do anything. It's just a mode of transportation. It's, not only do you have to have the right equipment, but you've got to have it on you. And that's one of the things that you guys need to understand, is that we can sit here and talk all day about what to have and how it's used, and it's really awesome, and it does work. But if you don't have it on you, just like carrying your firearm, it's going to do you no good. So not only do we need to carry it, but then, Joe, we need to get some training on that too, right? So for me, you could start off with saying, hey, go here. Where would I go first to get some medical training?
I think probably the most basic course you could take, but definitely the most helpful, would be CPR first aid. And you can go to the American Heart Association, go on one of their websites. You can go to the Red Cross. They offer the same, and they offer different levels. You could start off just taking very, very basic CPR on just an adult, and then work your way up to the most advanced level of CPR and first aid, where you're working on now an infant, a child, and an adult. The National Association of Emergency Medical Technicians offers courses as well that you could take. There are some that are called Pre-Hospital Trauma Life Support, another great course. Keep in mind, though, some of these courses you need to have advanced certifications for. So you very well may need to be an EMT to take those courses. And even an EMT class is really only 120 hours.
So I could start off with American Heart Association or Red Cross, go through a first aid class, get the CPR, and then in some cases they have the AED tied to the CPR class, so I can learn how to do that, because I'm seeing those more in malls. The AED, so that's an automated external defibrillator, so
Correct.
that kind of stuff. So I see those sitting around in malls a lot, and that certification helped me put that into use should one of my loved ones have a massive heart attack right there. And but then outside of that, I know that there are guys like you who do medical for a living, who also have a nice pedigree in the military for doing medical as well, that offer some type of external classes that are out there. And there are not very few of guys like you who do that, but I'm aware of several of them. I'm not saying that you do, but there's several of them that do classes for civilians who want to learn how to work on their own family and their own selves at a little bit higher level, without the whole liability of working on someone else. Certainly be careful in doing that. But I would ask you guys, do you have a blowout kit? Do you know what's in it, and do you know how to use it? If you don't, there's a lot of good training out there. First, start off with the American Heart Association or Red Cross, and learn first aid and CPR, and then CPR with an AED. And like Joe had mentioned earlier, not only on an adult, but a child and an infant, because there's slight differences amongst the three. Once you have that type of training and that type of knowledge, I want you to understand that it's perishable. So once you learn it for yourself, train your family members so that they know how to work on it, because it might be you that needs the medical training. Hey, thanks for coming to the shop today. We'll see you guys next time.